Stand with me one more time, would you please? And turn to the person next to you. Grab him by the hand, look at him right in the eyeball and say, man, are you good looking? Tell him that, I dare you. Man. Man, are you good looking? Amen. Praise the Lord. Well, it's always exciting to be here, and Pastor Ron and I go so far back, so many years ago, and I remember when God first opened the opportunity for him to pastor this church, and what an exciting time, and look what all that God has done. It's just been amazing. I want to share with you a thought this morning. How many have ever played in the mud? How many have ever told your kids, don't play in the mud? How many know if you tell them not to play in the mud, they're going to play in the mud? That's the thing about mud, is it will get all over everything. Isn't it interesting? We never tell our kids who are clean, go outside and let your clean rub off on them kids that are dirty in the mud. It just doesn't work that way. It really doesn't. The mud. The mud. Remember the football games that used to be in the mud? I mean, those are my favorite games, the mudders. I remember the Browns and the Packers and the Browns and the Steelers playing in the mud. Now, I could pass on a game if it was on artificial turf. But if it was raining and it was muddy, I'm going to stay to the end. I don't even care what the score is. To me, the score was, how much could your uniform be covered in mud? Well, I want to speak on that today. I want to title my message, Dirty Jobs. Dirty jobs. And there's a job that you and I have as believers, as followers of Christ, that is a dirty job. It's found in Mark chapter 4. Listen to this. And he said, Jesus, so is the kingdom of God like a man casting seed into the ground, and should sleep and rise night and day, and the seed should spring up and grow up. Notice here, yet he does not know how it works. I call that the law of the dirt. Anybody who tells you they're an expert on this subject of sowing and reaping, they're lying to you. Because this verse tells us nobody knows how this works. And a lot of times we think, if we'll just be better, if we'll do better, if we'll give more, then things will work out better for us. I'm not saying that isn't true, but you don't know how that works. He should rise up day and night. It grows up, and he doesn't know how it works. Wouldn't it be interesting to have a seminar on how things don't work? I'm now in my mid-60s, and I feel like I'm at the point in ministry where I've just about found out how everything doesn't work. Notice with me, this pulpit doesn't work. We'll smash the whole thing by the time I'm done, It's not my church. Galatians 6, verse 7. Be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption, But he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. And let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. I want to talk a little bit this morning on this subject of dirty jobs and the 7 laws of the harvest. 7 things that happen in the dirt. And only 2 of these do we have any direct instructions to do anything about it. And that happens to be the first one. And that is, we only reap what we have sown. We only reap what we have sown. Galatians 6:7. For whatsoever a man soweth, no seed, no harvest. If you don't give anything, you're not going to grow anything. Now, it's funny, we always think about seed time and harvest as, a great thought about giving into the kingdom, and it's applicable, certainly. But think about this. Everything you do, everything you say, everyone you help, everyone you hurt, you are sowing a seed. Your life is a seed. Now, sometimes we want to sow more seed. Sometimes we want to quit sowing seed. The fact is that you cannot have a harvest unless you have sown seed. That's the one of 2 things you have to do. You must sow seed. Now, I know a lot of people that want to harvest but have never sown anything. I know other people who want to get in on somebody else's seed. It's funny. I was in Haiti years ago, and there was a little tin shanty outside a big old mansion. And that's the land of Haiti. It's a land of contrasts. You have the rich and the poor and no middle class. That's why Haiti's in such trouble. It's the middle class that always helps everybody. The rich exploit the poor, and the poor are exploited by the rich, for the most part. But I saw something interesting this day. There were thousands, and I mean tens of thousands, of wires that came out of this little tin shanty that went up to the power supply in this mansion. And I said, what is all this going on? Why are all those wires coming out of that shanty? And they said, oh, they're stealing electricity. And I got a sermon. There are some people who are plugged into God. Then there are some people who are plugged into people who are plugged into God. Then there are some people who are plugged into people who are plugged into people who are plugged into God. And then there are some people who are plugged into 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 God. And you know the story. You see how it works. Some people want to get in on the harvest that somebody else has planted. Get in on the orchard that somebody else has laid the seed for. We only reap what we have sown. I found this little poem. You can't have a sermon without 4 points in a poem. Our barns will be filled and our vats overflow as we bring our first fruits to him. Many believers, their faith being slow, wait too many years to begin. We must remember the harvest law. It came from the lips of God. We ponder this truth and wonder in awe as we sow in this earthly sod. Here is a truth you need to know. You reap only if you sow. So hesitate not. Get on the go. Sow your seed and watch it grow. By investing your life in God's design, you will reap well at harvest time. We only reap if we sow. And secondly, we reap the same in kind as we sow. We reap the same in kind as we sow. Notice again Galatians 6, verse 7. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he reap. It says, whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he reap. I remember years ago we had a lady that was our landlord. We actually lived with her and her husband. They lived upstairs. We lived downstairs. In fact, he died in my arms many years later. And she lived to be almost 100 before we eventually moved out and bought our first house. And every Saturday, we would take her shopping, every single Saturday. In fact, we made a lot of cancellation of trips out of town because we had to take care of Oma. That's German for grandma. And so we would take her shopping, and I always knew that what I was doing was a seed. And I was always aware that one day I'd be her age. And I just knew it in my heart. I was never going to worry about who was going to take care of me when I'm old. Because I've already laid a foundation. I've already laid a harvest for that. Somebody says, well, have they started to work? Because you're getting pretty old. Well, no, not yet. Not yet. Not yet. Notice that whatever seed we sow, we reap in the same kind. In the same kind that we sow. If you sow an apple seed, you get what? Blueberries. No, you don't get blueberries, you get apples. Your seed will produce after its own kind. When my wife and I were first married, we had a missionary over to our little 2-room apartment. I had just bought a new car. In fact, it was my first new car that I ever bought. It was a Vet. A Chevette. That was all I could afford. I remember paying $7,000 for that car. And I thought, how does anybody afford $7,000? You know, I think they gave me a 4-year loan. I needed like a 40-year loan. You know, how are you ever going to pay $7,000 on what we make? And then I bought another car. It was about 5 years old. It was a Mercury Capri, standard shift. I was making payments on that too, unfortunately, but not very many. And so we had this missionary couple over, and they were talking about how they needed a vehicle, and they wanted us to pray with them, and they were itinerating throughout the United States, raising funds to go back, ironically, to Haiti. And there was a lull after dinner, and we kind of went from the kitchen into the living room, and I pulled Julie aside. I said, honey, the Lord is speaking to me. She goes, I already got the message. I said, what? She goes, we got to give him one of our cars. I said, that is exactly what the Lord told me. And I said, which one? She said, well, we'll know by the end of the evening. Now I'm getting really nervous. And so we gave them the Mercury Capri. And they loved that car. And they drove it all over the United States. And now we only got one car. We need another car, and we eventually got another car. And the years passed, and God blessed me so many times for that gift. I was driving down to West Virginia to preach. And the Lord spoke to me and said, you have a car coming to you. I'm like, I have a car coming to me. And I'm like, Lord, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, you sold a car years ago. And you have a car coming to you. And I said, Lord, you have blessed me 1,000 times for that car. So I got 2 brand new cars right now. So you blessed me over and over again. And the Lord said to me, every seed produces after its own kind. You give a car, you receive a car. So I get down to West Virginia. I'm preaching. The first night, a brother in the church says, I got to show you something. Come on out in the parking lot. I go out in the parking lot. He goes, look at this. It was a new used Lincoln Town car, and it was a beaut. It was back when Lincoln Town cars were sweet. I mean, this thing is big. It's a tank. He goes, I've always wanted a Lincoln Town car. I believed God for this. I trusted God for this. I prayed. I fasted. And finally, God blessed me with this beautiful car. I said, that is a nice car. He said, and the Lord told me to wax it every week. I'm thinking, the Lord told you that? He said, the Lord told me to change oil every 3,000 miles. I'm thinking, the Lord told you that? I think the auto dealership told you that. And he said, and the Lord told me next time Dennis Heber comes down here to hand him the keys to his Lincoln Town car. I said, say what? He said, here's your car. Now, this guy has just been laid off into coal mines. And he's wanting to give me his car. I fought with him. I said, I can't take your car. So I can just see the newspaper getting a hold of this. Evangelist comes down and steals laid off coal miner's car. You know, I can just see it now. He said, Brother Dennis, if you don't take this car, you're going to rob me of my blessing. Now, I tell you, it was one of the hardest things I ever did. I only drove that car once. I had Pastor Ron drive down to West Virginia with me, and he drove the Lincoln back to his house. He had more room to kind of store it for a while until I could decide what to do with it, which I eventually sold it and paid for a missionary trip. And he brought it over to my house the day before I was to deliver it to the buyer. And he said, you've never driven this thing. I said, no. He goes, you should drive it. I said, all right. He goes, I'll follow you. And so we went around the block. When I lived in Rocky River. Small little blocks, less than a mile long. I drive around. Pastor Ron's right behind me. I come over another curve, and next thing you know, a Rocky River police officer pulls over behind me. And he pulls into the drive with me and gives me a ticket because the license plate was expired. I tell you this whole story to tell you this. Seeds reproduce after their own kind. Have you ever noticed when you let people go in the freeway, you let them just go on? You'll get that. Did you ever have somebody have some road rage at you? Maybe it's because what's gone around has come around. Years ago, I went to my uncle's farm in South Dakota. We would go there about every other summer and help work on the farm for a couple of weeks. I loved it. City boy, coming out to the farm. It was great. My uncle would get us up early in the morning, 3 o'clock. Get up, boys. I'm going, what, we got the night shift? What's going on here? No, it's time to go to work. said, we got to work in the fields this early? He says, no, we'd never have you do that. It's time for chores. You do chores before you go to work. So we'd have to go out and get the cows, milk the cows, feed the chickens, feed the pigs, feed everything else. And then we came in for breakfast. We did all that before breakfast. I want to go back to bed. I said, no, it's time to go out in the field and combine, bale hay. And then we'd come back around 5 o'clock. We'd be so exhausted. But then you got evening chores. And you did it all over again. Get the cows, milk the cows. Then about 7 p.m., you go in for dinner. And then you go straight to bed because you got to do this again tomorrow. But one day my uncle gave me and my cousin the day off. He says, you're free today. Go do whatever you want. And we were about 13. I was about 13 and he was 13. But out in South Dakota, you can drive when you're 13. But it's all farmland. So my cousin and I go in his truck to a cow auction. We just go watching them auction off cows, and it was a lot of fun. And then they bring out a little miniature horse. It wasn't a pony, it was an actual horse, but it was a miniature horse. They bring it out, and I'm thinking, oh man, I'd love to own that thing. And they said, well, let's start off the bidding at $15. Well, I had $15. That's all I had. And I know how this stuff works. Somebody gets it started, and this horse is going to sell for thousands of dollars. So I raised my hand. I'll give $15. He gets sold to that young man right there. I said, I didn't really want to buy this horse. I want to, but where am I going to put it? My dad's going to kill me. How do we get this back home to Cleveland? It took us 2 hours to get that horse in the back of his truck. And I'm in the back, with my horse. And he's bucking and rearing and bucking, just won't stop. So my cousin's driving. I said, what do I do? He's bucking and rearing. He goes, well, just hit him. Hit him. Let him know who's boss. So I smacked him on the hide, and it didn't faze him at all. Big old hide, didn't bother him. I go, he's still bucking. He goes, you really got to hit him. So I jacked him right in the jaw. He looked at me and collapsed. I knocked him out right in the back of that truck. He's laying in the back of the truck. I said, cousin, I killed the horse. I killed my horse. A few minutes later, it woke up and kind of got back up. And I'm like, oh my God, he's not dead. And we got all the cousins got out. They're all going to ride the horse. And he was really tame. And all the cousins got on him and he rode the horse. And so finally I said, I'm going to show you how this is done. It's my horse. So I get on the back of that horse, and I'll never forget it. He turned around, gave me the eye, and reared me off, and I landed on my head. That horse remembered me. I thought it was a coincidence, so I get back on him, All the cousins are laughing, and he throws me off the second time. And I realized, what you sow is what you reap. What goes around comes around. The next law, the third law, is that we reap in a different season than we sow. We reap in a different season. Galatians 6:9. In due season, we shall reap. It's one of the areas that discourages so many believers. They've sown a seed and they want to harvest today. Listen, some of the decisions that you made years ago, you're experiencing them now. The question is, were those good choices? Were those good seed? Or were those not so good seed? like my Oma. I knew that while I was sowing that seed, I was not going to experience a harvest. But maybe in my 80s or 90s, if I'm like my dad, 97 like my dad always said, he said, son, your behavior is going to take 3 years off my life. I was the T in the word trouble. My dad pastored a church. I remember one time he had to come down out of the pulpit while preaching and break up a fight down in the basement of the church. I remember preaching my dad's funeral. I told that story about how he always say, "You've taken 3 years off my life." He died at 97. He was supposed to live to be 100. What's coming next season for you? What seed are you laying now? It's just going to absolutely revolutionize your future. I think of my grandsons. I think of it all the time. I'm on the clock, just like all of us are. It's ticking. And most of my life is behind me. And I know that. And I really want to make these next 20, 30 years really count. To really sow seeds that produce something. To see what was sown in my daughter now to be in my grandsons. And that they will produce it in their kids. In their kids. In due season. At the right time. Timing's a unique thing. Somebody said timing is everything. It really is. And yet it all works according to God's design. You sow the seed, you reap a consequence. Number 4, the fourth law, is that we reap the same in kind as we sow. I'm sorry. I kind of lost my way here in my notes. Number 4, we reap more than we sow. We reap more than we sow. How many know that when you plant one apple seed, you don't get one apple? Huh? In fact, here's the interesting thing. There are many orchards, potentially, in one apple. There are many orchards, potentially, in one apple. You could say this. There are many orchards in one apple seed. When you think of the law of multiplication. Think about this. You are God's seed. Imagine everything that lies within you. Genesis chapter 3 tells us that God only planted a seed once. He only made one horse. Read it. That's what it says. He only made the horse once. And he placed within the horse a seed. He only planted grass one time. God has only planted grass one time. You may say, man, I'm a landscaper. I've planted it thousands of times. Nah, you took off God's original seed. He places seed within the seed. There is within everybody here this morning amazing potential. In Matthew 13, Jesus told two very interesting stories. He told a story about a man who sold everything he had in order to buy one pearl. And then there was another man who sold everything he had in order to buy one field. Now, the pearl is a type of Christ. That if you have Christ in your life, you could sell everything and you're still a rich, rich man. The other story is a little more interesting. The field, in fact, the text says, the field wasn't of that much value. It was what he could do with the field. You know, you and I think at the last, what are we worth? If you take everything, put us down to dust, about what, 88 cents? I know this. When God saved me, I was an absolute nothing. An absolute nobody. Going nowhere. To do nothing. And God picked me up out of the gutter and saved my soul. And he saw something in me that was going to reach the world. If you'd have told me, you know, Mike and I went to high school together. Mike, if you'd have told me that long-haired hippie freak was going to preach the gospel in 55 countries, I'd have said, man, you smoking that wacky tobacco again. Probably bought it off of me. I don't know. See, God doesn't see where you're at. He sees where you could be. Direction is always the most important thing. Your sense of direction. I'd rather be a foot out of hell and heading from it than a million miles away and inching towards it. Where are you going today? Where are you going? What harvest is about to spring forth in your life? We reap more than we sow. I don't care what you sow, you're going to reap more than that. And the next law, the fifth law, is that we reap in proportion to what we sow. Look at Luke 6:9. Given it shall be given unto you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, shall men give into your bosom. For with the what? Same measure you measure out, it will be measured back to you again. In other words, you give a little, you get a little. You get more than you gave, but it's still you get a little. If you give a lot, you get a lot. Way more than you gave, but you still get a lot. I heard a missionary one time. She had a big tub of sand up on the stage. She had a shovel in it. And she had a little tiny saucer with some sugar in it and a teaspoon on it. And she took the big shovel. She said, give this to God. This is what God gives to you many times over. She took that little teaspoon. Give this to God. This is what God gives you many times over. Many times over. We give in proportion. We reap what's the proportionate to what we have sown. It's measured out that way. The text here is very interesting. Because the verse before verse 9 says this. It says, judge not and you shall not be judged. Judge not and you shall not be judged. In other words, if you judge people, if you make your life one of a critic, criticism is coming back your way, good measure, pressed down and shaken together. I call that gospel measure. But you give out loving kindness and tender mercies. And guess what's coming back to you? Loving kindness and tender mercies. It's like there was an evangelist one time that put a big tent up in a rural area. And he usually went in the big cities, but there was a big storm, and so he set up his tent in this rural area, and he was taking an offering. And they had the people march. There were thousands of people. They would march and bring their offerings and put them in the bucket. Same thing we did years ago. And a young boy came up crying. Oh, Jesus! And the evangelist said, "Young man, what's wrong with you?" He said, "I've been saving up for my first cow. When you were talking about the offering, the Lord told me to give my cow money." And he put his money in the offering and he walked away. That's called being a cheerful giver. And a little while later, about 20 minutes, because it took that long to take the offering, this old man comes up. Evangelist said, "This is crazy. What's wrong with you?" He said, "I heard that little boy talk about giving all that cow money. He said God spoke to me to give him one of my cows." We reap in proportion to what we have sown. Law number 6. We reap the full harvest only if we persevere. Galatians 6:9. For in due season we shall reap if we faint not. I don't care where you're at in life, it is always too soon to quit. It is always too soon to quit. You will always succeed if you don't quit. Success will come if you don't quit. I always tell my young Bible school students, I said, "Listen, I know it's tough for you right now." I said, "The ministry gets even tougher." I said, "But I'm going to give you permission every now and then to threaten to quit as long as you make me this promise. You never will." Tommy Barnett, who pastors a great church in Phoenix, Arizona, thousands of people. He says every Monday morning he comes in, grabs his cup of coffee at 8:30, goes in for an hour and a half, and tells God he's done, he's quitting. He said, "I'm not working." He goes, "Everybody hates me around here. Nobody will work with me." And he just complains for an hour and a half, and then he goes back to work. He says, "I get it out of my system, and I enthusiastically go back to work." Don't ever quit. Don't ever give up on your seed. Keep pressing your way. And that brings us to the final point. And that is, we can't do anything about last year's harvest, but we can do one thing about this year's. Now remember, I told you there are two things we do. We reap or we sow, but there's one more thing we do. And it's in that original text that I showed you. And that was in Mark chapter 4. Let's read it again. And he said, so is the kingdom of God like a man casting seed into the ground. And he should sleep and rise day and night, and the seed should spring and grow up, yet he doesn't know how any of this works. You say, well, what do we do? 2 years ago, I was going through a very difficult time in my ministry. I can't tell you how things have turned around. It's been unbelievable. But something caught me off guard I didn't expect. I had so many contacts. I never thought about the fact that they would get old and retire, die, and leave their churches. I mean, I knew I was getting older, but I didn't feel older. I didn't feel any older. But all of a sudden, all my fellow pastors are retiring. And here's the thing about an evangelist. Congregations don't invite me. Pastors do. So when the new guy comes in, he doesn't know me from Adam. And in most cases, not all, but in most cases, I lose that relationship with that church. A good portion of our supporters, our monthly supporters, were dying. And all of a sudden, we're struggling in more ways than one, financially, emotionally, spiritually. And I didn't know what to do. I remember asking God, Lord, should I get a secular job? I mean, I've been doing this full time for 40 years. I wouldn't even know where to work. And I asked the Lord, I had 3 prayer requests. And I said, Lord, I have to get an answer on these 3 things. 1, well, should I file for bankruptcy? 2, should I get a secular job? And the third one was private, which I'll keep that way. And God immediately answered the first question. Now, this was him answering me. It's not him answering you. This is how he answered me. And he spoke to me a verse out of Proverbs that said this. It says, the wicked borrow and don't pay back again. The wicked borrow and don't pay back again. Now, are you saying that everybody who's filed for bankruptcy is wicked? No, I'm not saying that. But for me to file for bankruptcy would have been wickedness because I had other options, which I took. I was just getting out of bed and the Lord spoke to me and said, the answer to your first prayer is in this house. And I knew what that meant. I was to refinance my house. I had 3 weeks left on the mortgage. And I did it. I refinanced. And the pressure came off of me. It was amazing. The second prayer was also answered. I got a job for 11 months working at Amazon. And there was a good reason for me having that job. I won't get into it now. Never spent a dime of my money. Put all the money in the bank. Never spent it. Still haven't spent it. Didn't need it. I really didn't. But I did need to work for 11 months at Amazon. And a year ago, March, I left. There was one other prayer request. The Lord still hasn't answered. Now, there were other things I was praying about, but those were 3 critical things. Now, they told me I couldn't move beyond this certain section here because of the television. By the way, you that are watching at home, put your hand on the screen. I've always wanted to do that, just put your hand. But that you did say I could come down here, right? Right? Yeah. I could come down here. What do you do when you don't know what to do? What do you do when you don't know what to do? Wait? Sorta. You're sort of right. Here's what the Lord taught me. When you don't know what to do, you've prayed, and you don't know what to do, you don't have an answer. Here's what you do. You go to sleep. You go to forever? No. Eventually you get up. And then you go back to sleep. Notice what it says in verse 27. He should sleep and rise night and day, and the seed should grow up. You don't know how it works. What's my job? My job is to sow and sleep. How many of us, we don't sow and we worry? And we stay up all night worrying. What am I going to do? How am I going to get it done? It says he sleeps and he rises night and day. Night and day. You're praying about something, you don't know what to do, here's what you do. Go to bed. And then get up. You say, well, I still don't know what to do. And you go back to bed. And you get up. You say, well, it's been 2 weeks of this. Now what do I do? Go back to bed. I've been sleeping on that third prayer for 3 years now. But I don't know what to do. And rather than me do the wrong thing, I'm just going to go to bed. You know, the Bible says that the Lord doesn't slumber and he doesn't sleep. He can stay up all night and watch over my life. There's no reason for the two of us to stay up. You and I have one dirty job. Keep sowing. Just keep sowing. You say, what's the other dirty job? Go to bed. And get up. Go to bed. You know what some of you need this afternoon? A nap. I'm going to give you a homework assignment. Are you ready? I'm only going to give it to you if I do it too. You need a nap. I can tell by looking at you, some of you need a nap. And every mom said, amen. Go to bed. Just go to bed. Just let the Lord take it from here. I guarantee you, if you sow seed deliberately and go to bed, one day you're going to rise up and this tree is going to be so big and you're going to say, I don't know how that thing happened. I don't know how that thing worked like it did. The law of the dirt is you don't know much, and that's okay. Stand with me, would you please? How many want to go play in the mud? Yeah. Yeah. I got to get my flowers in. I usually have them in right after Mother's Day, but I'm a little late this year. But half of it is getting them beds ready. I mean, somebody's already sown the seed for them flowers. I'm just going to buy them. put them in the ground. And then after I'm done, I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to go to bed. I tell you, God is calling us to enter into his rest. His rest. That's what he said. He said, my burden is easy, and my yoke is light. I'm doing all the heavy lifting. All you got to do is sow some seed and go to bed. I mean, I don't know. If somebody's lost today, you need to get saved. This is the easiest gig in town, man. All you got to do is sow some seed and go to bed. Does it get any easier than that? Just sow some seed and go to bed. Father, I thank you. I thank you, Father, that we have the wonderful privilege of being involved in your harvest. I pray everybody here today is sowing for a great harvest in the days, the weeks, and the years to come. Lord, help us to be deliberate in our seed sowing. Help us, Lord, to give to you in our life, our lifestyle, in everything that we do. And Lord, I know that in the end, the harvest will be great and we'll be well rested to reap the harvest. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Father. If there's anybody here today who doesn't know the Lord Jesus as your Savior, you've never personally asked him to come into your heart. Is there anybody here you've never asked the Lord to come in your heart and you want to? Could you put your hand up? Is there anybody? I don't know everybody here, but is there anybody here you've never asked Jesus in your heart? But you know you need to. You say, well, is it hard? No, he's done all the work. It's like sleeping. All you do is just walk with him and invite him in your heart. Is there anybody? Just put your hand up and put it back down again. Put your hand up, put it back down again. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Father. You know, a good farmer is one who's outstanding in his field. Let's go out in the field today. After that nap, let's sow some more seed. Amen. Amen. Mike?
Amen. Thank you, Dennis.